13.3 Efficiency, Price and Value. In this chapter, you study about consumer efficiency, the paradox of value, consumer surplus, and the paradox of value. Marginal utility theory helps us to deepen our understanding of the concept of efficiency and to see more clearly the distinction between value and price. Consumer efficiency. When Tina allocates a limited budget to maximize her total utility, she is using her resources efficiently. Any other allocation of a budget would leave her able to attain a higher level of total utility. But when Tina has allocated her budget to maximize her total utility, she is on her demand curve for each good. A demand curve describes the quantity demanded at each price when total utility is maximized. It tells us consumers' marginal benefit, the benefit from consuming an additional unit of good. Marginal benefit is the maximum price a consumer is willing to pay for an extra unit of a good or service when total utility is maximized. The paradox of value. The paradox of value is known as diamond water paradox. For centuries, philosophers like Plato, Copernicus were puzzled by the paradox of value. How economists determine value and ultimately price. Perhaps value is associated with usefulness or utility. A shovel is the most useful thing you own, but it helps because it helps you in gardening. Therefore, it must be very valuable and worth a lot of money. But we know that shovel doesn't cost much. Maybe value is not connected to usefulness or utility. Maybe it is connected to the amount of labor put into an object as analyzed by Marx. A plant in your garden is a fruit of your labor or sweat of your toil. Therefore, it must worth millions of dollars, does it? No. Therefore, usefulness or labor cost is not the ultimate rooting of value. Water is more valuable than a diamond because water is essential to life itself, yet water is much cheaper than the diamond. Why? Adam Smith tried to solve this paradox, but it was not until marginal utility theory had been developed that everyone could give a satisfactory answer. The classical economists like Marshall Stanley Given, known as marginalists, explain in terms of subjectivity. They use the term marginal utility. If you are in a game show and you could choose between two prizes, a diamond and a bottle of water, it is easy choice because diamonds are more valuable. Now imagine being given the same choice, but now you are in a game show, but you are not in a game show, but on a desert, dehydrated, wandering for days. Now you choose differently. Does it mean diamonds doesn't have any value? On the game show, you are looking at exchange value, what you could obtain for them at later time. But in an emergency like desert scenario, what matters far more is their use value, how helpful they are in current situation. And we only get to choose one of the options. We also have to consider their opportunity cost. What we lose by giving up the other choice. After all, it doesn't matter how much you could get from selling the diamond if you never make it out of the desert. Most modern economists deal with the paradox of value by attempting to unify these considerations under the concept of utility. How well something satisfies a person's need or wants. Utility varies for different people under different circumstances. A market economy provides an easy way to track utility. A utility something has to you is reflected by how much you would be willing to pay for it. Total utility tells us about relative use value or usefulness, but whereas marginal utility tells us about relative price or exchange value. The total utility from water is enormous, but remember, the more we consume of something, the smaller is its marginal utility. We use so much water that its marginal utility, the benefit we get from one glass of water, diminishes to a small value. Diamonds, on the other hand, have a small total utility relative to water, but because we buy few diamonds, they have a large marginal utility. When a household has maximized its total utility, it has allocated its budget so that the marginal utility per dollar is equal for all goods. Diamonds have a high price and a high marginal utility. Water has a low price and a low marginal utility. When a high marginal utility of diamond is divided by the high price of the diamond, the result is a marginal utility per dollar that equals the low marginal utility of water divided by low price of water. The marginal utility per dollar is the same for diamonds as for water. The figure below shows the diminishing marginal utility of water for every additional unit and increasing marginal utility of diamond. The total utility of a consumer is maximized when marginal utility per dollar of diamond equals marginal utility per dollar of water. And it is calculated by mu over price or equals mu or price of water. Consumer surplus. Consumer surplus measures value or utility in excess of the amount paid. If a consumer buys Q units for P price, however, he would be willing to pay a higher price for an initial unit of X, which means that his actual expenditure is less than what he would be willing to spend to acquire Q quantity of good X. This difference is referred to as the consumer surplus. Thus, consumer surplus equals total utility or value derived by the consumer. The paradox of value relates to the problem of what determines the relative price of products. In order to resolve this paradox, we make a distinction between the total and marginal utility. Marginal value versus total value. The marginal value or MV is a value or utility to a consumer of the last unit of consumption, also the price he is willing to pay for that unit. In the demand curve, price is equal to the marginal value of the good. Total value or utility is the sum of the marginal value at that quantity. It consists of consumer surplus and total expenditure. It represents the area below the demand curve. In diagram 1, the total utility that consumers derive from water is extremely large. It is given by the area under the demand D. Indeed, we cannot possibly show the curve for very small initial quantities of water because price is going to be very high. People would be in fact willing to pay all they had rather be deprived completely of water. On the other hand, the total utility that consumers derive from diamonds is shown by diagram 2 as area under the demand curve D. The TU is clearly less in case of diamonds as compared to water. The supply curve of diamonds S makes diamonds scarce and keeps their price high. Thus, the equilibrium is E2. The area PDQD indicates the total market value of diamonds, while the supply curve water makes water plentiful and the PW or the price of water low. The equilibrium is at E. The total market value of water consumed is low and is given by the area PWQW. Thus, the market price of the product depends on its demand and supply. Therefore, no paradox is involved where a product from which the consumers receive a high total utility sells for a low price and has only a low total market value. That is, the amount is spent on it. Incorporating the concept of abundance and scarcity, marginal utility solves the paradox of value. And the CS or TV or total utility gained from water far exceeds CS gained from diamonds. Most consumers have abundant access to water, so the value of additional unit or marginal unit is negligible because of large supply they already have. Therefore, the marginal value or utility of water would be almost zero. In the figure, although the MV of diamonds is relatively very high, the TV or the total utility of diamonds is very low relative to water. Because diamonds are scarce commodity and it is a very rare precision for most, so an additional unit of diamond is prospected to have a much marginal utility than water.